Let's get into tonight's big story, and let's talk about some stunning revelations about the Ukrainian military that were just released by the Ukrainian press. Not the Western press, not CNN, not anybody else, but the Ukrainian press had some harsh things to say about the Ukrainian military. We'll get there in a second. We will get to that story. But first, a couple of bigger developments in the broader war, in the coming NATO war with China and Russia. First to China, which the top U.S. commander this afternoon in Japan has a military response, says we need to have a military response to China's military exercises in the Taiwan Strait. That the United States must contest this, he says. China's recent decision to fire missiles over Taiwan is a gorilla in the room, he says, that has to be contested. So do we? Let me just say, according to whom? According to you, the U.S. military, we need to contest this? For what reason?
Because we provoked it.
So we provoked it, and now we need to contest it?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be sure we're all on the same page. Beijing has carried out huge air and sea drills, he says, this month around Taiwan in a furious reaction to the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and a congressional delegation. Those exercises included firing multiple ballistic missiles into the waters off Taiwan. We have the video, right? Firing all of these missiles. Really, this is the provocation. Some of the world's busiest shipping routes. And it was the first time China has taken such a step since the mid-1990s. That's what it is, right? All of these missiles, all of this China attacking over Taiwan. We now have to contest it. And the live fire drills that China was carrying out, we have to contest it. So here was Carl Thomas, the U.S. commander in Japan, talking about, he is the guy who made these comments, and says we need to talk about controlling the rules-based order. Listen.
Maritime security is about working together to preserve the international rules-based order, which has proven successful over the past 7 decades. This rules-based maritime order not only protects resources and provides greater maritime security, but reinforces the imperative for all mariners to abide by a shared ethos of professionalism. We all share the international water space and therefore share in the responsibility to ensure that we cooperate and work together to uphold the delicate balance of maritime stability.
Okay.
Maritime stability then.
Anything to add?
So many things. I mean, okay, why is that your, again, if you sort of were to reverse the roles and it was Mexico saying, this is what is going to happen in the Caribbean waters and the United States is not going to have any say over who, it's just, I don't know, it seems very ethnocentric to me.
Yeah, I mean, so China launches these live fire drills. They launch these missiles over Taiwan to show off their military force and power, to say, okay, this is our island. We are one China. We are one China. We are, Taiwan is ours. And of course, the focus on the Kinmen Islands we've talked about could be the area that there is a first invasionary point for China. They then release this white paper saying we want to roll.
We want a
unified
one country, two governments system. This was China's sort of proposal on paper, right? Almost like a settlement agreement. This is what we're going to do, right? And the United States is sort of pushing China to say, or Taiwan to say, you don't want that. We're going to protect you from all the way around the globe, right? We're on your side. Do not become one with them.
Right.
Is that did we have the same philosophy when we, with Puerto Rico and Hawaii, or was that?
No, we just took them.
Was that different?
No, that's what we do. We just take them. We take Guam, we take Puerto Rico, we take Hawaii if we want pineapples. We took Hawaii because we wanted pineapples.
Among other things.
Right.
Yes.
And we're going to get to a little bit later in the show why we're in Somalia, why we're in Syria. Right. So the U.S. wants us to contest China in their own backyard, showing that the shipping lanes and this area that the rest of the world has basically cut off, NATO has cut off. They're showing that no, this is our backyard. So the United States needs to contest that. So that's just one big piece of this. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, along with United States help, continues to attack the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. George Eliason had reporting over the past 48 hours that there are Ukrainian soldiers now with radiation suits being put in place nearby as the attacks continue, getting ready for a nuclear fallout from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And Russia has some warnings about that this afternoon. This just came out a short time ago from the Russian Ministry of Defense, saying that there is, in fact, a major concern about this turning into another Chernobyl as a result of this. And if we continue to attack, this is how this is going to go. Russia warns of another Chernobyl this afternoon. Kiev's shelling of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant could result in a worst-case scenario, Moscow warns. Ukraine's ongoing attacks in the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant may cause a far worse disaster in Europe than the current energy crisis, says the Ministry of Defense. And they're showing this map of where this is going to go. Now, we've talked about this here on the show, in nuclear material in a cloud, as you can see in this picture, floating all the way across Western Europe, into Western Europe and beyond.
Yes, and, we had a segment last week about what actually the nuclear fallout will mean for humans, right? For the food supply. Now, just today, there were talks of at least peace agreements or some semblance of that, at least for international trade. But are we going to want what is traded out of that region if there is any kind of nuclear spill, right? Like Dr. John Campbell has said, if this happens, you're not going to want to consume milk from this region, or vegetables, or anything, or certainly not grain, right, that will be exposed to radiation. Not even to mention, there's not enough time to even talk about what would happen to wildlife, what this sort of fallout would be for this kind of nuclear spill.
Now, there's trilateral talks today. So this is the big peace talk discussion today. So you had Erdogan, the president of Turkey. You had Gutierrez, the UN secretary, flying in and meeting with Vladimir Zelensky today. So this was the video just a short time ago. You can see them there shaking hands. There's Erdogan. And reportedly, Erdogan is bringing a peace plan. This was the whole idea. Meeting today to bring a peace plan to the Ukrainian president. The whole idea is for this meeting to try to push towards peace, force a peace. Do you think he will do it? I mean, I'll ask you guys in the chat. Do you think these two guys, do you think Vladimir Zelensky is going to agree to a peace plan? Will Erdogan and Gutierrez have success in bringing and trying to persuade Zelensky towards a ceasefire and peace talks? Good luck with that. Good luck with this. By the way, during one of Zelensky's stand-up routines, he called Erdogan a cockroach with a mustache. So this was Zelensky before he became, I don't know when exactly this video was from, but this is when doing his stand-up routines before he became president, mocking Erdogan. Let's see how this goes.
Турецкий квартас на канале Алтин плюс Алтин. И сразу будет острая политическая реприза. Итак, внимание. Эрдоган усатый таракан. Вы думаете, нас посадят? Максимум, что сделают 300 плетей. Вот такой вот острый юмор. Давайте поаплодируем.
Well, maybe he will get those lashes he called for.
Yeah.
100 lashes.
So mocking him as a cockroach with a mustache. So again, good luck with this meeting, which comes as you have, the United States military-industrial complex this afternoon signing a letter, pushing an article, forcing basically NATO and the United States into more weapons, more bombings. 20 members of the military-industrial complex signed this article today, pushing for more in Ukraine. Here it is in the Hill. U.S. must arm Ukraine now, before it's too late, it says. And as the Nebulator writes, this list of names who've signed this thing, let's just kind of go through what these names are in this article. Let's see what we've got here, the Nebulator says. 3 retired generals, Wesley Clark, the Butcher of Belgrade, and 2 insane warmongers, Phil Bawana, Breedlove, Ben Hodges, former NATO commanders, a fistful of diplomats, neocon Deborah Kagan, liberal Banderite Paula Dobrynski, former Balkans Gaultier, Daniel Fried. There's also a whole bunch of other people on this list. And so these are all people who are members of the deep state, who are longtime military warmongers who are pushing for more.
Right, who have no interest in these peace deals that may be discussed today, right? I mean, it's nice to sort of, we could hopefully think that, well, there's no Westerners around, maybe peace has a chance if there are if this is just between Erdogan and Zelensky and one in between. But I don't know. It's hard to. The United States really does have a lot of influence there, even when they're not physically there.
Well,
I was even wondering if he had earpieces in, did they
Right.
take out his earpieces before he sat down so they couldn't dictate what he was supposed to say?
Right.
You're talking about Zelensky specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So,
that's
so
the-
no Western forces can be in his ear, literally.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing, right? I mean, because remember Boris Johnson, right? So Boris Johnson put the kibosh on peace talks a few months ago. He was so worried that Zelensky was going to cave to peace talks that he flew there. Remember, look at this video, this photo here, flew there. Boris Johnson pressured Zelensky to ditch peace talks with Russia, according to a Ukrainian paper. And then, the Sun even reported Russia and Ukraine peace talks are doomed after his visit. Says
Boris Johnson.
Oh, I wonder why they're doomed. Because you doomed them.
Because I said so.
Because I went there and told you not to have a peace talk, not to have peace talks with Vladimir Putin. That's why they're doomed. Because I doomed them.
Because in the context of this story, it wasn't Zelensky himself, but representatives from Turkey and Russia. I'm sorry, from Ukraine and Russia were meeting in Turkey regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some sort of glimmer of hope at the time that some peace could be reached, but then the goalposts continue to move in a more impossible manner to something that we've seen is just, it's not possible for Ukraine to take back these areas of the Donbass, to take back Ukraine or Crimea. None of this is really going to happen. So because these goals continue to get moved, people will continue to die in this conflict.
And today, new photos emerged showing Ukrainian troops getting training at a field center in Kent, England. So if you're living in Kent, you can drive by and see your British government training Ukrainians for more attacks. These are Ukrainians getting training in Kent. And there's some javelins, and I love this photo. Keep this up there. This is go back. Go back. Sorry. And this photo. So this photo, you can see this is
Very realistic.
yeah, it's like a movie set.
It does look
Right?
like Universal Studios
Yeah.
backlot.
But it's designed, it's like this is supposed to be like a Ukrainian village. Like this is what it looks like. So here's how we do our training, thanks to the British military. And, to be honest, it really doesn't look like the United States is interested in these peace talks at all, because the United States has quietly given anti-radar missiles to fight Ukraine. We learned about this today as well, that the U.S. has been quietly giving Ukraine radar hunting missiles that could really be a problem for Russia, according to Business Insider. U.S. Marines loading an AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missile. So they're continuing to send as much as they can. A top defense official said this month that the U.S. has been sending Ukraine anti-radiation missiles. The official didn't say which missiles, but there are reports of AGM-88 missiles in Ukraine. But there's another, and again, so
It just cracks me. It just cracks me up. It's like, we're going to load the weapons for you. We're going to deliver them for you. We're going to show you how to use them. But sorry, we just can't push the button. Here, you just push this red button right here, and that'll fire it off. Now, here's how you aim it. It's like we're doing everything but pushing the button.
Yeah.
Well, and I think in many ways we might even be pushing the button now, because if we can
Yeah,
justify
true.
hitting in Crimea, and we're firing HIMARS, and we now know there's confirmation of HIMARS attacks at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So the United States, as Scott Ritter pointed out, should be held in violation of war crimes. The United States actively coordinating HIMARS attacks on a nuclear power plant in Ukraine, using our weapons to attack. And it gets us off the hook. It gets the United States and NATO off the hook if they're attacking Crimea, because they don't recognize Crimea as Russian, right? As Russian territory. So under international law, to them, they can say, well, this is not a violation because this is Crimea, this is not Russia. So we can authorize special forces attacks and on ammo dumps and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
And we can pull that off. Meanwhile, finally, the Ukrainian press, this is an unbelievable story, is reporting what we've been reporting on this show for months, that much of the Ukrainian military leadership has been a total shit show. And this investigation was just published by the Kiev Independent, and it's being silenced on social media. But we wanted to share Put up the one that says Kyiv Independent. Sorry, I got the wrong order there, Philip. If you go to the next one. There we go. So this is from the Kyiv Independent, and it's being silenced on social media, but we want to shed light on it here. Back then, this is a story we're going to get to in a second, but because back then when all of these stories were breaking and we were covering it here on the show, now you can go back to this. Ukraine was pushing out fake news in their press. Reports coming out of Kiev, like this one, for instance, like this was total fake news. Reports coming out of Kiev that Ukraine of a soldier being nicknamed as the Ukrainian Reaper, who's killed over 20 Russian soldiers on his own. He's a hero. Like we heard about the ghost of Kiev. Like all of those stories were coming out when they should have been covering the truth, and they weren't. So they were spinning out propaganda. Well, now the Kyiv Independent is reporting on this massive story with the headline, Suicide Missions, Physical Abuse, Physical Threats, International Legion Fighters Speak Out Against Leadership's Misconduct. Now, this is a Ukrainian report. Now, I love at the very beginning of this article, there's a massive disclaimer. They put up this massive disclaimer. Maybe they learned about how Amnesty International got in trouble, right? So here they have this massive disclaimer at the top of the news article that says the Kyiv Independent is publishing this investigation to shed light on the alleged abuse of power in the leadership of one wing of the International Legion, a legion created for foreign fighters dedicated to defending Ukraine as part of the Territorial Defense Forces. The members of the Legion's unit say that they reported their commander's misconduct to Ukrainian law enforcement, the parliament, and Zelensky's office, but they saw no proper reaction and thus turned to journalists as a last resort. Soldiers who pointed at the problems within this unit of the Legion claim they received threats for speaking up for their safety. Well, we do not disclose their identities. Boy, do they go into some details here about the top intelligence leadership running the wing of the International Legion for the Ukrainian military. All sorts of abuse, theft, sending soldiers totally unprepared into missions, but most notably, suicide missions. Knowing, like they're literally like almost like kamikaze style. Hey, just go run right out there. Just go run right up to that tank, please. Like just, no, it's an order. Just run. Just go, you're going up to that tank right now.
And remember, most of them are not trained soldiers. It talks about conscripted soldiers, right? Mm-hmm. People who didn't want to do this in the first place, but were otherwise not allowed to evacuate Ukraine with their families.
Right. Yeah, and Americans, British soldiers, Canadians who were showing up, right? So we first talked about this story back in March or so of this year. We covered this story on the show. We got in trouble for covering it, of course, but Americans were joining up with the Ukrainian army, and these Americans who went there, who wanted to shoot some Russians at the time, right? What they saw there shocked the hell out of them. And here was one American soldier. We featured this guy at the time. He got the hell out of there. This was an American. He was blasted all over social media, by the way. People mocked him like crazy. Liberals mocked this guy. They called him a wimp. They're like, you look, this guy's probably a little whiny baby. Like these liberals who've never left their house. They're making fun of this guy. And they mocked the heck out of him. Well, it turns out everything he was describing was just confirmed by the Ukrainian press in their investigation of the Legion. Here's what he had to say about the leadership and what he was being told to do. Listen.
So for any of you who are wondering what is going on, all right, we were part of the Georgia National Legion, the 102nd Ukrainian Territorial Defense, okay? Our base got fucked up. The base right next to us got fucked up. Americans, British, tons of British dead, all right? They're not saying nothing. They're counting our dead as their dead. They're trying to send us to Kiev with no fucking weapons, no kit, no fucking plates. The people who are lucky enough to get weapons are only getting magazines with like 10 fucking rounds, okay? When they wanted to send us to Kiev, we said no. Our whole group, a bunch of Americans, Canadians, British. So they told us we had to get the fuck out or they were going to shoot us in the back, all right? So me, this British guy, and another American, we fucking hid in the back of an ambulance to get out. We got to the border, and it was a whole nother mess. When you get to the border, anyone who has kit, anyone who has any military shit, they're fucking pulling you out of the line, and they're sending you back to the front. We got dropped off about 5 clicks from the fucking from the border, and we walked. And we get to the border, and this humanitarian group with a bunch of ex-SF veterans from England pull us to the side and say, you need to get, like, pulled us out and fucking, like, hit us. And they were like, you need to dump all your kit. They're pulling people out, cutting up passports, sending them back. So we dumped our shit. We got, like, in all of our fucking, we got in, like, Red Cross vests, and they had, like, fucking humanitarian passes to get us through the Ukrainian border. People need to stop coming here. It's a trap, and they're not letting you fucking leave. The best way to leave is like in a Vic or a car or something. People who get on by vehicle have a better chance of hiding their fucking kit in the back, doing whatever the fuck they can, but do not try to leave Ukraine on foot if you're a volunteer.
So do not come here. Do not come here. Some people in the chat saying, isn't this old? Yeah, this was from March, right? We reported it then. But it was radio silence from the Western media. Like, what is going on in this? What's going on in the Ukrainian military? Like, why are they? Who's run the show over there? It's a total disaster. Well,
now many in the chat are saying, why'd you go there in the first place, right? Because this guy bought the line of the media that they were in need, that they, right? Like he believed in something,
right?
Thought it was a noble cause, and then he gets there and sees something like that's not necessarily his own fault. I agree. It's an aggressive move to volunteer for an army for a fight you're not involved in, though.
Well, there are those people that are just like bloodthirsty. They're like, hey, I'm not in the military anymore. I've got some guns. If I can go shoot some Russians like it's 1985.
I've been in lockdown for 2 years. Let's go.
Right. And, and not being educated on what's actually happening.
Sure.
So anyway, it's a fascinating read. I would encourage all of you to read the Kiev Independent story about this and this investigation, but to hear it from the Ukrainian press writing about the dysfunction and the abuse inside of the Ukrainian military. I wonder if they'll shut them down.
Right. You cannot say this because it will dry up support for our profitable weapons trade. So
yeah.
Well, then we can't forget what we've done in the past too with Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam. Like just from our entire history has just been about empire expansion.
Yeah, but we don't call it that because Americans don't like the idea of colonialism, right? So we don't call it that. It's been all hidden. In fact, I have a new something big I'm working on for the show, for this channel that I'm working on about that specific history of America's imperial power that I'm working on, writing it, and hopefully we'll be producing it in the next few weeks. Little sort of documentary style that's going to be released here on the channel just about that very specific topic. So stay tuned for that.
We had a super chat from Syket, I think, saying, why can those Ukrainian soldiers go to the UK if they haven't been able to leave Ukraine? I had the same thought, like, oh, they can spare a few to go do some training, because I thought it was they needed every bullet, like
they need
how
every
does
bullet,
that work?
they need every man.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
This is why they've been releasing prisoners. We've covered the story here that Ukraine has released all sorts of hardened criminals.
Yeah.
And they've armed them to the hilt, right? So now all of these, former, all the worst of the worst, they've let out of prison and they've armed them and they're allowing them to fight. And now this afternoon, actually, the SBU, which is the security service in Ukraine, has gone around and started arresting these people because it turns out it's not a great idea to hand out massive amounts of weapons to hardened criminals. So now they're going around and trying to arrest them again.
Well, and also, if you think about the guy that you just showed, you think of how hard it was for him as an American to leave Ukraine. Think about the Ukrainians that are stuck there. You're saying like those guys didn't really want to fight in the first place, but they're giving them orders to go stand by that tank, and they have to do it knowing that what's going to happen to them if they don't obey that order.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and there's all sorts of videos about this that we can't show on the show now that the Kiev Independent actually highlights. So to their credit, they actually have videos, like secret recorded videos of Ukrainian military leaders trying to talk to Americans, telling them what to do and where to go. And these Americans are like, we're not doing that. That's a suicide mission. So to their credit, they've got that.